Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the world of aviation navigation.
Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, you sent over an FAA training document all about this,
Yeah.
all sorts of navigation technology, and we're going to try to unpack how it works at its core,
Right.
understand those basic principles and see how pilots use these systems, especially when they're flying on instruments.
It's a very complex world, but fascinating at the same time, going from basic radio waves to how those signals are used to guide airplanes safely across the globe.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me. I'm always amazed by how much tech goes into making sure planes get where they need to go.
Uh-huh.
So the document starts off talking about radio waves, and apparently these invisible waves are like the backbone of how planes find their way.
That's right. They're electromagnetic waves that are traveling through the air, and different navigation systems use specific frequencies to transmit and receive signals.
It specifically mentions space waves. Are those the same kind of radio waves that like I used to listen to my favorite music station?
They are. And the document focuses on them because they have this line of sight characteristic.
Okay.
So imagine standing on top of a hill. You can only see as far as the horizon.
Right.
Space waves work very similarly, which is why some navigation systems have limited range.
Oh, interesting. So if I'm understanding this correctly, like a pilot flying over the ocean isn't going to be able to pick up signals from a station that's, beyond the horizon.
Exactly. And the document goes on to explain how the frequency of a radio wave also plays a role. Lower frequencies, like those used by VOR systems, can bend a bit over the horizon compared to higher frequencies that are used by DME.
Okay, so it's like trying to see over that hill further by like standing on your tippy toes.
Good analogy, and that's why when you're flying away from a VOR DM station, the DME signal being higher frequency will typically disappear first.
Okay, that makes sense. But the document also mentions things like static and how it can interfere with these signals. What kind of impact can that have on a flight?
Well, static can be more than just annoying crackles. It can actually cause some strange effects on instruments,
Really?
sometimes making them give false readings or, in some cases, stopping them from working altogether.
Wow.
I've even heard stories of pilots hearing motorboat sounds on their audio, almost like the static is trying to talk back to them.
Wow, that's wild. I had no idea static could be so disruptive. I guess it makes sense, though, since it's basically messing with those radio waves that we were talking about. And speaking of strange phenomena, the document even mentions St. Elmo's fire. Have you ever encountered that while flying?
I've been lucky enough to avoid it, but I've heard from colleagues who've seen it firsthand.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a bright electrical discharge, almost like glowing fingers crawling across the windshield during a thunderstorm.
Sounds a bit eerie. I bet it makes you realize just how powerful these atmospheric forces can be.
It certainly does. Thankfully, modern aircraft are designed to withstand those forces.
So we've talked about radio waves and some of the challenges that they can face, but how are these waves actually used for navigation? The document dives into the NDB, which sounds pretty old school.
It is one of the earlier systems. Think of it as a radio station on the ground, constantly sending out its location in all directions.
Okay. And the plane has this thing called an ADF that picks up on those signals, right?
Right, the automatic direction finder acts like a highly sensitive compass, but instead of pointing north, its needle points towards the NDB station.
That's pretty cool. But how does that help a pilot navigate? If the needle is always pointing at the station, wouldn't you just end up flying in circles around it?
That's where the concept of relative bearing comes in. The ADF doesn't just point to the station. It shows the angle between the aircraft's heading and the direction to the NDB.
Okay.
So the pilot can use that information to figure out how to get to or from the station.
So even though the ADF needle is fixed on the station, the pilot can still use it to fly in a specific direction?
Exactly. The pilot can maintain a specific heading based on that relative bearing, ensuring they're flying on the desired course to or from the station.
I'm starting to see how this all fits together, but the document also talks about different types of ADF indicators. Are those just different ways of displaying the same information?
Essentially, yes, they all display the relative bearing, but they present it in different ways. Some have fixed cards, while others have rotating compass cards, or even something called a radiomagnetic indicator.
Hmm.
Each type offers its own advantages and disadvantages in terms of how quickly and easily a pilot can interpret the information.
It's almost like having different maps to guide you, each highlighting different aspects of the terrain.
Hmm.
But it sounds like the ADF is more than just a way to find a station. The document mentions all sorts of functions like plotting positions and even executing holding patterns and approaches.
Absolutely. The ADF is a versatile tool that can be used in various phases of flight. It can help pilots maintain a specific course, navigate to a particular point, or even hold their position in a designated area.
It's like a Swiss Army knife for navigation, but then the document gets into homing and tracking, and that's where things start to get a bit fuzzy for me. Can you break those down?
Sure, imagine you're walking toward a radio tower while always facing it directly.
Okay.
If there's a strong wind pushing you sideways, your path won't be a straight line, it'll be curved.
Right.
That's essentially what homing is with the ADF.
Hmm.
You follow the needle directly, but your path can be affected by things like wind drift.
Ah, that makes sense. So homing is like taking the scenic route, while tracking is more like following a straight line on a map.
You got it with tracking. The pilot maintains a desired magnetic bearing to or from the station, which ensures a more direct route, even with wind, of course. That requires the pilot to constantly adjust their heading based on the wind, using the ADF needle's deflection as a guide.
So it's like walking a tightrope in the sky. You need to make constant adjustments to stay on course.
Exactly, and that's why pilots need a good understanding of wind drift and how to compensate for it when using the ADF for tracking.
Wow, it's amazing how much goes into simply staying on course. But let's move on to the VOR, which the document describes as the primary navigation aid used in the National Airspace System. What makes it so special?
The VOR, or Very High Frequency Omnidirectional Range, takes things a step further. Instead of just pointing to a single station, it provides 360 different courses or radials that a pilot can fly to or from the station.
So it's like having a compass with 360 degrees instead of just north, south, east, and west?
Exactly. It's like a network of invisible airways in the sky, all emanating from the VOR station. And the document mentions that these stations are often paired with distance measuring equipment, or DME, to give pilots both direction and distance information.
So it's like having a map with latitude and longitude lines with both a VOR radial and a DME distance. You can pinpoint your exact location.
Precisely. And to help pilots make sense of all this information, the VOR indicator instrument has several key components.
Like what?
Well, there's the Omnibearing Selector, or OBS, which allows pilots to select the desired course they want to track.
Okay.
Then there's the Course Deviation Indicator, or CDI, which is a needle that shows how far off course the aircraft is.
So it's like those old arcade driving games where you had to stay in your lane.
Exactly. And to avoid any confusion about whether you're flying towards or away from the station, there's the TOFIRM indicator. All of these components work together to provide pilots with a clear picture of their position and heading relative to the VOR station.
Wow, it sounds like the VOR is a pretty powerful tool, but how does a pilot actually fly using one of these things? I mean, how do you translate all those radials and needles into an actual flight path?
That's where things get really interesting. The key is understanding how to interpret the CDI and use it to stay on course. But that's a topic for our next segment.
Okay, you've got me hooked. So we've gone from basic radio waves to understanding how these ADF and VOR systems use those waves to guide aircraft. We've even talked about wind drift, relative bearings, and radials, but I'm eager to dive deeper into how these systems are actually used in flight.
Hold tight, we're just getting started in part 2. We'll explore the practical aspects of flying with VOR, as well as dive into the world of GPS and ILS. It's going to be quite a journey.
Can't wait to see you in part 2. Okay, so we're back and ready to go a little deeper, I guess, into the how-to of aviation navigation.
Okay.
Last time we got the basics down, right? Radio waves, ADFs, VORs.
Right.
But I'm ready to see, like, how do these systems actually work in the cockpit?
Well, let's pick up where we left off with the VOR.
Okay.
Remember those 360 radials emanating from the station?
Yes, like spokes on a wheel.
Right. So think of it like following a road.
Okay.
Let's say you want to fly outbound from a VOR station on the 090 radial that's due east.
Uh-huh.
You would dial in 090 on your OBS, the Omni-bearing selector we talked about.
Okay, so I've set my destination radial.
Right. And you watch that CDI needle.
The course deviation indicator.
Correct. If it's centered,
Yeah.
you're right on track. If it deflects left, you need to turn left to intercept that 090 radial and vice versa.
Sounds straightforward enough, but what about wind? Doesn't that kind of mess things up?
Absolutely. Wind can push you off course. That's where the pilot's skill comes in. They need to anticipate the wind's effect and adjust their heading accordingly.
So it's not just about following the needle, it's about understanding like how the wind is influencing your flight path.
Precisely, the CDI is your guide, but it's up to the pilot to make the right corrections to stay on course. Now, flying inbound to a station is a bit different. Let's say you want to fly inbound on that same 090 radial.
Okay, so I dial in 090 on the OBS again.
You do. But here's the thing. The CDI will now work in reverse.
Okay.
If it deflects left, you need to turn right to intercept the radial and vice versa.
Wait, why is it backwards?
Think about it when flying outbound, you're moving away from the station. So a left CDI deflection means you need to turn left to get back to the radial.
Oh, okay.
But when you're inbound, you're converging on the station.
Right.
A left CDI deflection means you're too far to the right of the course, so you need to turn right to correct.
Ah, that makes sense. It's all that perspective.
Exactly. It takes practice to master,
Right.
but once you get the hang of it, the VOR becomes a powerful tool for precise navigation.
So we've tackled VOR now. Let's talk GPS. It's become so ubiquitous in our daily lives, but I'm curious to learn how it's used in aviation.
GPS has revolutionized aviation, providing global coverage and remarkably accurate positioning regardless of the weather. Instead of relying on ground-based stations, it utilizes a constellation of satellites orbiting Earth.
So instead of listening to radio stations, planes are now listening to satellites in space.
Each satellite transmits precise time signals. An aircraft's GPS receiver picks up those signals and calculates its distance from each satellite.
Okay, so the plane knows how far away it is from a bunch of satellites, but how does that translate to knowing its actual location?
Think back to geometry class. Remember triangulation?
Vaguely something about triangles and finding angles, right?
Right? If you know your distance from 3 points, you can draw circles with those distances as radii. The point where those circles intersect is your location. GPS uses a similar principle, but in 3 dimensions requiring signals from at least 4 satellites.
So by combining the signals from multiple satellites, the GPS receiver can figure out its latitude, longitude, and altitude.
Exactly. It's like having a cosmic positioning system that's always on and always accurate.
That's incredible, but the document also mentions something called differential GPS or DGPS. What's that all about? Is it like GPS plus?
You could say that DGPS systems enhance GPS accuracy by using ground-based reference stations.
Okay.
These stations know their precise location and compare it to what the GPS satellites are saying. Any discrepancies are used to create correction signals.
So it's like having a fact checker for GPS, making sure everything is accurate.
A perfect analogy systems like WALBS and LAS use these correction signals to make GPS even more precise.
This is fascinating. So we have ground-based systems like VOR and space-based systems like GPS, but what about land? The document briefly mentions the Instrument Landing System, or ILS. What can you tell me about that?
ILS is like having a virtual runway in the sky, especially important when visibility is low. It uses 2 main components: a localizer, which aligns the aircraft with the runway centerline, and a glide slope, which gives vertical guidance for a safe descent.
So it's like following a radio-controlled ramp all the way down to the runway.
Essentially, and to make sure the pilot is on the right path,
Yeah.
there are marker beacons that act like checkpoints along the approach.
Sounds reassuring. But the document also mentions other systems like SDF-LDA and MLS. How are those different from ILS?
Think of them as different levels of precision.
Mhm.
SDF is like ILS light. It gives you direction but isn't as accurate. LDA can be even trickier because its course might not be aligned with the runway.
Hmm.
And then MLS, well, that's more like ILS Pro, offering a wider range of approach options and greater accuracy, but it's less common.
So ILS is the workhorse for precision approaches, and the others offer alternative options for different situations.
Exactly. It's about having a toolbox of approaches to handle various airport layouts and weather conditions.
Okay, so we've gone from radio waves to ground-based systems to satellites to precision approaches. My head is spinning, but I'm starting to get a sense of how these different systems work together to get planes where they need to go.
And we're not done yet. There's a whole world of advanced systems like WASA-LA and even inertial navigation that we haven't even touched on.
Wow, we've barely scratched the surface. I'm ready to dive deeper into those in part 3, but for now I need a moment to process all this amazing information.
I hear you. It's a lot to take in, but it's all part of the fascinating tapestry of aviation navigation.
All right, let's take a short break and come back for part 3 to explore the cutting edge of this tech. Welcome back. We've covered a lot in our exploration of aviation navigation.
We have.
From radio waves and ground-based stations to the wonders of GPS and those nail-biting precision approaches.
Yeah.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And as promised, we're going to push the boundaries even further in this final segment.
Okay.
Looking at WASA-LAR and even inertial navigation systems that represent the cutting edge of this technology.
Okay, let's start with WAS, the Wide Area Augmentation System.
Okay.
Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Uh-huh.
The document describes it as a way to supercharge GPS accuracy, almost like giving it a turbo boost.
It's a great way to put it. WAS uses a network of ground stations and satellites to provide incredibly precise GPS guidance.
So how does it actually work? Does it somehow, like, tweak the GPS signal itself?
In a way, yes, strategically placed ground stations continuously monitor GPS signals.
Okay.
Looking for any tiny discrepancies or errors, they then calculate correction factors and transmit them up to a network of geostationary satellites.
So it's like having a GPS quality control team in space constantly fine-tuning the signals.
Exactly. And these WAAS satellites then broadcast the corrected signals back down to aircraft equipped with WAAS-enabled GPS receivers.
That's amazing. The document mentions that WAS is so accurate that it allows for a whole new category of approaches called APV, or approach with vertical guidance. What's so special about those?
Well, with APV, pilots can essentially fly a virtual glide path generated by the WAAS system, completely independent of any ground-based equipment.
Oh, wow.
It opens up possibilities for more precise approaches,
Yeah.
even at airports that might not have traditional ILS systems.
That's incredible. WAS is like taking GPS to a whole new level now.
Mm.
What about SILI's, the local area augmentation system? How does that differ from WAS?
Think of ELIS as a highly specialized version of WAAS. It focuses on a specific airport or local area.
Okay.
It uses a ground-based reference station right at the airport to transmit incredibly precise correction signals to aircraft on approach.
So it's like having a personal GPS assistant dedicated to guiding planes safely down to that particular runway.
A great analogy.
Yeah.
And because ELIS is so accurate, it allows for approaches in even more challenging conditions, providing pilots with an extra layer of safety and reliability during landing.
Okay, we've got WAS and ALAY, both boosting GPS accuracy. But the document also mentions something completely different. Inertial navigation. Sounds like something out of Star Trek.
Inertial navigation is like having a self-contained guidance system on board the aircraft.
So it can navigate without any external signals like GPS or ground stations.
That's right. Inertial navigation systems, or INS, use a combination of gyroscopes and accelerometers to track the aircraft's movements and calculate its position.
Gyroscopes, those spinning things we used to play with as kids, I had no idea they were used in aviation.
They are, but the gyroscopes used in INS are incredibly sophisticated and sensitive, combined with accelerometers that measure changes in speed and direction. They allow the system to determine the aircraft's position based on its movements relative to its starting point.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. It's like having a built-in sense of direction that doesn't rely on anything outside the aircraft.
Yeah.
But the document also mentions something about drift. What's that all about?
Even the most advanced INS systems can experience slight errors that accumulate over time. It's like walking in a straight line. Even if you try your best, you'll likely drift slightly off course over a long distance.
So even though INS is self-contained, it still needs a little help to stay perfectly accurate.
Exactly. That's why INS is often paired with GPS. The GPS provides regular updates and corrections, keeping the INS on track.
It's like having a backup navigator to double-check the calculations now, before we wrap up the document, touches on something called Required Navigation Performance, or RNP. Can you give us a quick explanation?
RNP is like setting performance standards for navigation systems in specific airspaces.
Okay.
It's about making sure that all aircraft operating in that airspace can maintain their position within a certain tolerance.
So it's like a quality control measure, ensuring that everyone is playing by the same rules and maintaining safe distances.
Precisely. RNP helps to create a more predictable and efficient airspace, especially in congested areas, or when using advanced navigation techniques. It's all about enhancing safety and optimizing the flow of traffic.
Wow, it's incredible how all of these systems, from basic radio beacons to space-based satellites to self-contained inertial units, work together to keep aircraft on course and flying safely around the world.
It is quite a symphony of technology and human ingenuity, and as we look to the future with advancements in artificial intelligence and autonomous flight, who knows what incredible innovations await us in the world of aviation navigation.
It's exciting to think about. Well, I think we've successfully navigated our way through this deep dive. We've decoded radio waves, explored ground-based and satellite-based systems, and even touched on the cutting edge of this incredible technology.
I hope you've gained a deeper understanding of how pilots navigate the skies and a newfound appreciation for the complex systems that keep air travel safe and efficient.
Absolutely. So the next time you're looking up at an airplane soaring overhead, remember that intricate web of navigation technology that's guiding its path, ensuring it gets to its destination safely and smoothly. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring and keep those questions coming.